Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today we're going to go back in time a little bit and look at the WHO being defunded by the United States and how much the United States spends in that funding. And we're going to look at a fundraiser that Justin Trudeau committed $850 million Canadian. And my question is, how are we going to pay for that? Who's paying for that? Oh, we're paying for that. That's our tax dollars. And we're borrowing it to lend it out to, or to give it to the COVID-19 EU response. I'll show you all that. First, here's a couple of weeks ago. In April, the White House announced it would be suspending financial support for the WHO pending a review of the organization's activities related to the COVID-19 pandemic, with President Trump stating the U.S. contributes between $400 million and $500 million per year to the WHO. Assessed contributions from the U.S. to the WHO have ranged from 107 to 119 million over the last decade. The U.S. has also made additional voluntary contributions ranging from 102 to 401 million per year. So that puts it about where Mr. Trump said. Here is Mr. Trump, and this is just 2 minutes highlighting of that speech where he defunded the WHO and the reasons why. So here we go, Mr. Trump.
The WHO to obtain virus samples to this date has deprived the scientific community of essential data. New data that emerges across the world on a daily basis points to the unreliability of the initial reports, and the world received all sorts of false information about transmission and mortality. The silence of the WHO on the disappearance of scientific researchers and doctors, and on new restrictions on the sharing of research into the origins of COVID-19 in the country of origin, is deeply concerning, especially when we put up by far the largest amount of money. Not even close. Had the WHO done its job to get medical experts into China to objectively assess the situation on the ground and to call out China's lack of transparency, the outbreak could have been contained at its source with very little death, and certainly very little death by comparison. This would have saved thousands of lives and avoided worldwide economic damage. Instead, the WHO willingly took China's assurances to face value, and they took it just at face value, and defended the actions of the Chinese government, even praising China for its so-called transparency. I don't think so. The WHO pushed China's misinformation about the virus, saying it was not communicable, and there was no need for travel bans. They told us when we put on our travel ban, a very strong travel ban, there was no need to do it, don't do it. They actually fought us. The WHO's reliance on China's disclosures likely caused a 20-fold increase in cases worldwide, and it may be much more than that.
So this is a reason after reason after reason to mistrust or to think that the trust we've placed in the WHO has been misplaced because, well, they're not doing their job, right? It is their job to go in and not listen to what China says, but to do their own assessment and come back and deliver to the world what their assessment is, honestly. But I mean, Mr. Tedros, during every early update, I commented on it at the time. This is a China love fest, right? He may as well have had a little Chinese CCP flag there waving the whole time, right? Like, he was like, China's done everything they could possibly have done, period, without any other questions. But, this is true, and this is true, and this is true. And Patty Haydu was also as sure as she could be with regards to the numbers coming out of China, going to as far as to call a member of the press, a reporter, a conspiracy theorist for daring to ask the question, should you believe the numbers out of China? Should you believe the numbers out of the WHO? How dare you, sir? Right? Greta eyes. But it's interesting now because yesterday, Justin Trudeau is pledging $850 million to the Coordinated Coronavirus Global Response. And my question is, and maybe I haven't done enough reading, maybe I should hold on a second here. Okay, so here's the fundraising About Me page. It's the European Union Coronavirus Global Response About, and it says funding goes directly to the recipients. Okay, and the funding recipients are the World Health Organization is the last one there, the Foundation for Innovative New Diagnostics for diagnostics, Therapeutic Accelerator for therapeutics, Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance for the vaccine deployment, the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation for vaccines. So this is where the money is being distributed. So it's interesting that the United States defunded the WHO for roughly 500 million, and Canada is pledging 850 million to fight this global pandemic, which is roughly, well, says Tedros here. Where is he? Tedros. He says it's 551 million euros. So just a little bit more, right? There you go. We'll fill in that US gap, except that we don't have the tax base. Why are we spending all this money? How are we going to pay for this, right? Here's Justin Trudeau making the announcement that we need to take care of ourselves by taking care of the world. Tax dollars be darned, right? Welcome to Canada. # post national state. Here we go.
This requires a global response. We know that the safety of our own citizens depends on how we keep people around the world safe. It has always been thus, but it has been more poignant and more noticeable during this global crisis. When a storm comes, people tend to want to hunker down with their friends, with their families, and wait till it blows over. But we cannot isolate ourselves. We cannot hope that everyone else does well while we take care of ourselves. We need to take care of ourselves and take care of the rest of the world as well. Take care of ourselves by taking care of the rest of the world. This is truly a moment for global leadership, and everything that people are doing, coming together to demonstrate that, is essential.
So it's weird to me that New Brunswick is one of the first provinces opening up, and they were trialing hydroxychloroquine. Isn't that strange? And I think that it's weird that the global response is looking so hard for a vaccine and ignoring the looks to be pretty efficable treatment of hydroxychloroquine and zinc. Right? It's just kind of strange, isn't it? And why are we funding almost exactly the amount that the United States pulled? Do we get to choose which recipient? Which recipient did we choose? How do we get any kind of what did we get for our $850 million? Or is it absolutely verboten to ask that? Are we not allowed to talk about that? Are we not allowed to say, what do we get for $850 million? Are they going to say a vaccine to keep you safe? Because no thanks. Here's the Global News saying federal deficit will likely hit $252 billion this year, the budget watchdog says. That's April 30th. So, I mean, what's another $850 million on that, right? Like, are you that numb yet? Or is it going to take another couple $100 billion on the Canadian deficit? We were just talking about a deficit of $20 billion a couple of months ago. And now, wow, right? And so when you throw on almost $1 billion, I mean, the shock value of that is minimal, right? Like, it's just, how do you even quantify that, right? Like, what's another $850 million when that's what we're looking for? And how are we going to pay for that? And why isn't this article? This is the article that's reporting CTV News that talks about the $850 million. Why doesn't this article talk about how are we going to pay for the giant, massive deficit and the fact that Justin Trudeau is borrowing to spend this money? How are we going to, like, why doesn't it mention that? Isn't that the responsibility of the news? I'll just read through this. I don't know if I started. No, I don't think I did. A global challenge. PM Trudeau commits $850 million to global fight against COVID-19. Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau said that Canada is contributing $850 million to the global fight against COVID-19, a commitment he made Monday morning during a virtual global summit focused on raising funds for research and development of vaccines and treatments for the deadly respiratory virus. He called the funding a beginning and vowed more to come as the international community collaborates on tackling the novel coronavirus that's rapidly spreading across the world. In the fight against COVID-19, our first focus will always be here at home, but this is a global challenge. To keep Canadians safe and restart our economy, we need to defeat this virus, not just within our borders, but wherever it is found. That's how we'll beat COVID-19 for good. Trudeau said, speaking about this pledge during his address to Canadians outside Rideau Cottage. I scroll down a little bit. Joining the fundraising event, the Prime Minister highlighted that to date, the federal government has committed funding to various domestic research efforts that will contribute their findings to the global effort. This has included funding to Canadian life sciences companies and to the World Health Organization's treatment trials, as well as creating strategies to tackle misinformation, stigma, and fear, according to a government statement. I mean, this government will include absolutely in every single bill they do a way to massage the public's opinion of it. And that's, I mean, the Harper government did this too, and I disliked it then. I used to talk about it with people who, well, I didn't at the time like Harper very much because of reasons like this, of using public money to run ads that run on radio, right? I think it's offensive. I don't think Canadian tax dollars should be used for advertising. I think that you should get like what's equivalent to a YouTube channel. You get a channel and a website, and that's it, right? And that's what Canadian politics should be: just channel and a website. You get to make of that exposure what you can, and everybody's on the same playing field. Anyway, I die. And I mean, somebody pushed back on me and said, "Do you think that then people who have a lot of support shouldn't get the benefit of donations from that support? That's cutting that off." And I was kind of, I didn't have a solution for that, right? But at the same time, I think that money should play less of a factor in politics than the ideas. I think that the ideas should be more important, and the best idea should win. But I mean, as we've clearly seen, you can take any amount of data and make any case you want, basically, right? It's just wild. Anyway, back to this. The goal of the event was to raise 7.5 billion euros, $8 billion, to cover what the European Union says is the global funding shortfall in preparedness. And again, I already talked about this, but this is the fundraising event. These are the recipients. Where's the accountability? How do we track this? How are we going to pay for this? What's another $1 billion, right? Who cares? Who cares? Yahtzee. Let's just pay for more, right? And here's Tedros again. He says, "Thank you, Justin Trudeau, Canada's Prime Minister, for the support to the WHO during the United Against Coronavirus pledging event for the contribution of $551 million to the global COVID-19 response. Together." Here's a report from 2019. World Health Organization blew almost $192 million on travel. The World Health Organization spent nearly $192 million on travel expenses last year, with staffers sometimes breaking the agency's own rules by traveling in business class, booking expensive last-minute tickets, and traveling without the required approvals, according to international documents obtained by the Associated Press. The abuses could spook potential donors and partners as the organization begins its week-long annual meeting Monday in Geneva, seeking increased support to fight a devastating outbreak of Ebola in Congo and other deadly diseases, including polio, malaria, and measles. The nearly $192 million is down 4% from 2017, when the agency pledged to rein in travel abuses following an AP investigation. But recent documents show WHO auditors found some WHO staffers were still brazenly misrepresenting the reasons for their travel to exploit loopholes in the organization's policies and flying business class, which could be several times more expensive than economy, even though they did not meet the criteria to do so. The agency's inability to curb its expenses could undermine its credibility and make it more difficult to raise money to fight health crises, according to Sophie Harman, a global health professional at Queen Mary University in London. She said the problem wasn't so much the amount that the WHO was spending on travel, but how it was being used. WHO needs to get its own house in order to legitimately go to the international community saying, "We need more money for Ebola," she said. Yeah, that sounds a lot like what Trump was saying the other week, right? Like, the WHO's very, very bad at what they're doing, and had they acted the way people expect them to have acted, then we would have seen fewer deaths. But instead, they parroted China's talking points. It's interesting, right? And here in 2019, this is posted May 20th, 2019, so last year, about the same time. Isn't it crazy, right? Isn't it wild? Criticisms of misspending, criticisms of focusing on the wrong thing, etc. It's interesting. Here's a very a ratioed tweet anyway: 172 likes and 995 comments, and people are not very happy with this global news tweet. Moving on, a world where they're tweeting, a world where you need an immunity passport or even a QR code to move freely during the pandemic could soon be a reality. In China, some of the practices have already been put into place. Do you support the idea of immunity passports? Here's a Twitter poll that was created 16 hours ago. 94% say no, they don't support immunity passports, and that's of 1,600 votes. But Twitter polls are unreliable, but so are global news polls and Angus Reid polls. Angus Reid polls, who somehow know the gun make and model before the RCMP have announced it. You know, thank goodness for those clairvoyant reporters. Isn't it interesting? But people are not happy about this, and I mean, I wasn't very happy about this. It's really interesting to see this consistent push across the media. Everybody, all of the legitimate media is talking like this and speaking as if the lockdown is a way of life, speaking as if it was inevitable, speaking as if the whole rest of the world is on lockdown. That's not the case. There are places in the world that are open. Taiwan is still open. South Korea is still open. There are places that are functioning as normal. And why is Canada failing so badly on this? I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Here's an interesting one from Global News. Faulty N95 masks sent to Canada was a contractual issue that was fixed, says China. A contractual issue? This one seems like a company's jerking you around, right? If you've ever made a purchase from like a supplier around the world or something like that, it seems like a company is jerking you around. I would use a different supplier. That's my advice here. But anyway, the Chinese embassy in Ottawa claimed Monday that the 1 million faulty N95 masks that arrived in Canada from China last month were the result of a contractual issue that has now been fixed. Canada, however, is thus far saying nothing about the matter. Both Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland and Health Minister Patty Haydu looked perplexed Monday when asked at their daily briefing about a statement posted to the Chinese embassy's Twitter account Monday morning. It reported that 1 million face masks exported to Canada from China failed to meet proper standards for healthcare professionals, the tweet said. The latest thing we found out from the communication with Global Affairs Canada is that the problem was a contractual matter and has been resolved. And there's the Chinese embassy tweet, right? Global Affairs Canada has been resolved. Freeland looked puzzled and turned to Haydu beside her, shaking her head. We'll have to get details back to you, Haydu said. I'm sorry, we don't have the technical information right now. That means we didn't see that tweet. Thanks for pointing it out. Uh-oh, I'm in trouble. It was inspectors in Haydu's department who rejected the shipment of N95 masks, which arrived in Canada in the third week of April. Neither her office nor Global Affairs Canada had provided any explanation as of Monday evening. So they get back to them, they did not. But that's not surprising from this government, right? Here's Mr. O'Toole. This was supposed to go earlier for the WHO, but he's saying here he doesn't accept the WHO's or China's numbers as a rule of thumb. And you can watch that. The video is in the description. And the last one here is shocking, not shocking. It's MSN via Global News. I'm not sure what the partnership is here, but it's msn.com. The link is in the description if you want to check it out. It says Canadians have racked up $5.8 million in coronavirus fines. Who says you can't tax people who are out of jobs, right? You can't increase those taxes. Sure you can. Carbon tax went up, right? Sin taxes went up. Here you go, right? You dare to go out to a park. You're putting yourself at risk and your family, right? You might find an overzealous bylaw agent or a police officer who's got very little else to do despite the rampant gun crime and drug crime in Canada. They might be at the park waiting for you. So stay inside, citizen. It's really odd. It's really odd. The slip and slide into what Trudeau describes as, what Trudeau envied and said he could turn the economy on a dime, right? He envies the communist ability to turn their economy on a dime. But the slip and slide toward that is fast, and it seems like it's got a lot of support. It seems like anybody who's trying to talk against it or say this is probably a bad idea, we don't want to go here. There's examples in recent history where this is bad, gets shouted down by Twitter bots and press that is less than honest, or less than honest in their perspective, less than honest in the narrative they're pushing, less than honest in the story they're trying to make the audience believe. Like the hydroxychloroquine, right? Like it seems to be having efficacy in all sorts of different places. The trials seem to be going well, and yet the world is behaving as if that's not true. So it's weird to see evidence like that and to have learned people say that evidence is faulty. Don't pay attention to that. And if you pay attention to that, you're a white supremacist. It's funny because that dog whistle knows, like, that's the part that makes me go, believing in this evidence doesn't make me a white supremacist, right? Like that's the break that tells me that person is parroting dogma and not really looking at the evidence. And so is it because Trump said it? Is it because there's other interests that want to develop the vaccine, the Bill and Melinda Gates people? I have no idea. I don't know what it is, but there's certainly something happening where the rest of the world is, if they can't ignore the hydroxychloroquine, they're going to ignore it, like hydroxychloroquine and zinc. They're going to ignore it in favor of this. They're going to ignore it and not open up the economy. They're going to ignore the low death rates, and they're going to ignore all of the signs that this has potentially been an overreaction. They're going to ignore all of that, and they're going to say we're not safe until we have a vaccine. I'm just not sure that's true. We haven't had a vaccine up until this point, right? We don't have yet a vaccine for SARS or MERS or AIDS or any of the new viruses that have emerged in the last, 40 years? So why are we going to have a new vaccine next year that's going to be beneficial? Look up vaccine trials that have hurt people, right? There's been polio trials that have done awful things. I don't know, man, but selling our health, potentially selling our freedom, selling our entire economy for potentially some snake oil, it has me greatly concerned. Has me greatly concerned, I'll say that. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out canadapoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co. Check out SpeakingMoistly.co. I'll be recording with Greg today. He said he would, and then I haven't heard from him. So we'll see. And have a wonderful, wonderful